Hey, hey, hey. So today we're going to dig in the Motivation Sucks episode, this episode of Motivation Sucks. What we're going to be digging into is my second favorite breakdown and breakthrough, or the second favorite barrier behind motivation being the ultimate barrier, and then the breakthrough that's going to take us through there. Now, before we dive in, let's kind of take a quick review about where we are and how we got here, and for those of us that haven't yet listened to the episodes from last week and or haven't yet listened to the episode from earlier this week where we discussed the first breakthrough and how that all worked. I'm not going to go into depth on what it's all about there in terms of how I'm not going to cover the same ground, but I am going to do a quick review so that we see where we are. Okay, so having said that, let's let me switch cameras here. And as you can see, what I'm holding up, or what's in the background rather, is in fact the actual diagram here that I've been holding up that's part of the 360-degree breakthrough and how to achieve that. So we discussed it previously, the barrier of confusion, of overwhelm, of being distracted. And then we talked about how the clarity breakthrough is what takes you through there. We also talked about how looking through the and paying attention to when we're not at peace, when we're feeling any of these less than peaceful yet less than optimistic feelings like depression, fear, anger, that those actually can become stepping stones, and that actually the reason that we're feeling every emotion that we're feeling is because of a Fred story. Yeah? So now we get to really kind of dig into the barriers. Oh, we also talked about the clarity breakthrough and making sure that we didn't disguise it, that it's not a disguised version of the trying to figure it out trap, and that it's a true clarity breakthrough. In other words, there's no uncertainty there, that there's some clarity, there's some enlightenment or actual light that has come in, and now we can see where we couldn't see before. And so we talked in depth about the trap there that you need to be cautious of and careful of. Now let's move into well, actually, you know what, before we do that, let me let's just talk about where we are down here in terms of, let me line that up right. Let's just make sure that we remember that we're starting off down here, and our goal is to where we want to be up here, your ultimate success. That's the 360-degree breakthrough. And we're defining that as the understanding, if you will, that it's unprecedented in terms of results for you. In other words, for whatever it is that you're going for, you've never actually yourself experienced it before, yet it's something that you desire to. And so once we get through that and understand that that's what's happening, and that's what we're the journey that we're taking, then we can start to become aware of the three major barriers, and then the emotions or the Fred stories that are telling us that we're getting closer and closer and closer to each of the successive breakthroughs that are necessary to take us over those barriers and move into the other thing. We also talked briefly about this not being a linear process. In other words, sometimes you go from here to here. And actually, that's probably a good place for us to bring this in, is to move down here. So once you have the clarity breakthrough and you break through this, it's not that you no longer have any of these emotions or that you're no longer coming up against confusion or overwhelm. It's that you've now seen something that you didn't see before and you have some clarity, but you can slip backwards. How or why? Well, emotionally, you can start to slip backwards if you start to feel as though you have a Fred story that you're not aware of. And we talked in depth yesterday about the Fred stories. And not yesterday, but in the previous episode, we talked in depth about the Fred stories and how they're the ones that are going to trigger those emotions. And how do you know that you've got a Fred story that's been conditioned deeply into your unconsciousness, or whether it's true or not? Well, you can tell by how you're feeling. The situation is just the situation. And if you're feeling anything less than peaceful about it, less than joyful about it, well, then you've got, in fact, a Fred story that's covering up the results there, that's covering up the possibilities. So once we overcome the confusion and now we step into the new realm, if you just think about this logically, we've got the confusion or the overwhelm barrier, the like not understanding where you are, not having the clarity that you need. It's not clear. But then we go into the inertia. So what's the next major barrier keeping you? Well, it's that fear of taking the next step. So let's line this up better so that I know where I'm at. Okay, now, and let's do my banner here to remind everybody that you can go over to motivationsucks.com. Oh, also, as we start to build out this community, primarily it's going to live on YouTube. So if you go to speakuphere.com, that will take you directly to the YouTube channel. And eventually that's going to be where all of the communication goes during these live streams. So would appreciate it actually if you would bop over there, hit that subscribe button, turn on the alerts so that you can get alerted directly from YouTube when we have these live episodes that we are broadcasting. And also start to get used to the community there and start to, invite other people into it. So we're talking about inertia now, right? We're talking about this big old thing. And inertia is pretty simple, and you're probably aware of it at any rate in terms of in yourself. But basically, let's just talk about the law of inertia and the law of momentum. The law of inertia says a body at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside source. So once you have the clarity breakthrough, once you've overcome a good piece of the emotional puzzle and you've got now some optimism in terms of where you're going, well, now it's not that you're fully sunshine and lollipops. You may have some lingering doubts, and that's okay. That's actually good because it's actually better than the frustration that you were experiencing when you were down here in the clarity breakthrough and the confusion barriers, lingering doubts, being doubtful, but that is feeling better than being frustrated or being angry or being whatever the case may be for you. So you make into the lingering doubts, which does feel better. And so now you've got a different Fred story, or you've got the opportunity to R&D Fred so that you can actually recognize, neutralize, and dissolve that Fred story. And as you do that, as you recognize that actually the reason why you're having the reaction that you're having emotionally to it, the reason why you're feeling those feelings is in fact because of a Fred story. And as soon as you can recognize that it's not the situation, it's not the circumstance, that in fact it's a Fred story that triggered that feeling, in that instant, when you can see that consciously, you're making the unconscious conscious, and now you are directing your destiny. You are directing your fate instead of it being left up to chance when you're not recognizing it. And that, in the moment that you recognize it, it goes and it allows that feeling to dissolve. And see if it isn't true. You've been given several different tools and techniques to let go of those Fred stories, to R&D them, to recognize, neutralize, and dissolve them. So here we are in lingering doubts. Well, we still have to overcome the inertia, which is what? The body is still at rest. In other words, whatever we're looking to achieve, in this case, our teaching model is building a online income, an online business, leveraging the internet, and that's our teaching model. So we still have to, nothing's changed in terms of getting into the game. Nothing's changed externally, although that's what we tend to focus in on, is all of the tell me what to do, tell me the tactical things that I need to do, tell me this, and this, and then I'll do that, and then I can see those results. And in fact, until you go into it feeling better, then you'll never fully overcome the inertia, and you'll be in fits and starts. And the instant that you have a little bit of success, you'll snap back. And that's really what, when we get to the third barrier, the barrier of motivation this week, and when we talk about the breakthrough that takes us through the barrier of motivation, then you'll really start to understand why, you may not have, you may have touched on some success. You may have touched on some of the things that you'd like to see happen, and here and there, but haven't yet experienced ongoing success, ongoing fulfillment when it comes to living that unprecedented bigger future. And if you've ever experienced something where the instant that you stop, or that you stop being diligent about it, that all of a sudden it comes up and there you are, boom, you're right back to where you used to be. Well, your set point is now back at a lower level. So the body at rest has to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Now we're getting to the point where you need to take those first steps. Well, what does it take to overcome inertia is having enough confidence, enough fuel in your gas tank to say, I'm going to try this. I'm going to get into motion. I'm going to be, the confidence is the fuel that's the outside source that can act on the body at rest. A body at rest tends to stay at rest unless it's acted upon by an outside source. And likewise, a body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. The problem is when we deal with the back and forth between these two breakdowns and breakthroughs, between the inertia barrier and the previous barrier of confusion, and when we bounce back and forth, what the motion that we're doing is a lot of chaos. It's a lot of chasing our tail. It's a lot of the same thing. And we think we're trying different things, but in essence, emotionally, we're moving back and forth in the same area. And that's the motion that's taken. So we need to actually build up enough fuel in the gas tank so that we can not only move past the inertia barrier, but also move into the law of momentuming, which is the law of compounding, where you start to increase, a penny a day, double it every day for 30 days. And you don't have 30 cents doubling it, or what you have is over $5 million at the end of that 30-day period because of the law of compounding. The problem with compounding and why we get discouraged early on is that on day 1, we have 1 cent. On day 2, we have 2 cents. On day 3, we have 4 cents. On day 5, we have 8 cents, and so on and so on. And by the time we get to day 16, for example, we only have something like $1.68 or something like that when you play the math forward. And the temptation in those early stages is to say it isn't working. It isn't working. This law of momentuming, this law of breaking through the confidence, and then our confidence gets eaten away. And our Fred story takes us back down underneath the barrier of inertia. So we still keep on coming up against that barrier of inertia because it's keeping us in the same spot that we've always been in, plus or minus a greater or lesser degree. And that's where we've gotten accustomed to being. It's the land of the familiar. Some people call it the comfort zone, but really it's the status quo. It's what we're familiar with. It's where it's what we expect. It's what we believe is going to happen. So sometimes it can get a little bit hot. The thermostat can get a little bit hotter and we can feel a little bit better. But now we're coming up against the inertia. Now, each of us have a different inertia barrier and threshold that we need to do. And it's just like lifting weights or exercising, right? Like you can build up a tolerance and you can go to different things. And on different subjects, you're going to have different levels of inertia. So what's right for me and what's different, what's right for you or where you're at or what you're trying to accomplish or what you're facing or what your particular Fred stories are will determine what you're trying to take on and how it's going for you, and whether that's the same for me or somebody else or different. It doesn't matter, because that's your particular battle on this particular subject that you're looking to just be aware of. And the more that you practice at becoming aware of your Fred stories, the more that you'll start to become conscious of your unconsciousness. You will be making the unconscious conscious. And that's what the Fred stories are all about. And so once you break through whatever the inertia is, and I like to look at confidence as the fuel that takes us to the next levels all the time, that even though our inertia levels are always going to be, we're going to face certain inertias, on certain subjects. And how do I know that we're always going to be facing the inertia barrier? Well, because if you've never achieved it yet, and you're concerned about if you can, if you've never lived the results that you're looking to live, you can bet that you have a Fred story that's been operating and that you haven't built up enough confidence, enough fuel in your gas tank on that particular subject to what? It's not really to force yourself through, because that's what a lot of us have been doing. But we're going to get to that when we get into the third barrier and the third breakthrough later this week in episode number 6. But what I'm getting at is that here we are. We have the breakthrough and the barriers and all of the things on that subject. But the more confidence that we have, the more that we're willing to get up and try again, the more that we can see the results, and the more that we have the energy to R&D, to have the courage, to have the commitment, to have the conviction to look at our unconsciousness and to pause for the cause. When our confidence fuel tanks run low, we fall back into that automatic reactionary way of being. We automatically behave the way that we've always been based upon our unconscious conditioning, i.e. our Fred stories. And as our confidence fuel grows, then we have the courage to say, well, wait a minute. I can stop. I can pause. I can look at this. I can say, is this true or is this a Fred story? And I can look at it and I can see and I can trace it back. And one game that I like to play with myself, and this is kind of an additional technique as an offshoot on, is this true or is this a Fred story, is if you're feeling anything less than excited, optimistic, anticipating success, expecting the results that you want to get, that they're just right around the corner, if you're feeling anything other than that, then whatever that emotion is, ask yourself, what must have been the Fred story that I've been running that has me thinking this way? What is the Fred story? And if you'll start to look at that and just assume that you have one, you'll start to see it, and you will start to automatically R&D that particular Fred story, and the act of R&D'ing it will add more confidence into your fuel tanks. It will give you more chutzpah, so to speak, to be able to R&D even more. And the reason is that all of these Fred stories are covering up your confidence, are weighing it down, are pushing it away. And so that's why each time you move from, say, lingering doubts to hopeful, being hopeful doesn't mean that you're expecting greatness, that you know that you can do it, that it's just a matter of not if it's going to happen, but when. But it does feel better than having lingering doubts, than being somewhat doubtful. Being hopeful means that you've shifted. And there might be many, whatever the words are, remember we talked about this, whatever the labels are that you want to put on this, no big deal. It's, what it feels to you inside. But the point is that as you move and you can recognize that whatever Fred story I was running is got me feeling like I'm still kind of concerned. I got lingering doubts. What's the Fred story that I've been running, or can I observe that? And then you'll find that automatically, as you let go of it, because you will be R&D'ing it, you will be recognizing it, you will be knowing again that it is in fact a story that you've been conditioned to tell yourself again and again so often that it's gone deep into your unconsciousness, that you no longer see it as a story, that it just becomes an absolute without question about what's going on. The instant that you can see that, then you become lighter, because now you see the unconsciousness. And so it automatically moves you up into a better feeling. Now, in this case, I'm taking a leap that, into hopeful, but maybe it's a different feeling. But you will notice, if you're truly acknowledging that it's the Fred story that created that emotion in you, then when you see it, instead of it being the situation, instead of it being outside of your control, instead of you having no choice in the matter, you can see it, then it automatically moves you to the next level where you feel lighter. And at the same time, it's adding more confidence to your confidence fuel tanks, so that you have more gas, so that you can move through the thing. And the same thing as you move up into cautiously optimistic. Like, all right, I don't want to get my hopes up too much. I don't want to be like, but I think this time it really is going to be different. Now that feels different. That feels better. That feels lighter. And I'm cautiously optimistic. Now you're getting close with your confidence to be able to act on your inertia of being in the same spot, of repeating the same things again and again and again, but expecting different results. Well, now you can actually come to dissolve the inertia standing in the way, to recognize what's causing the inertia, which is really a different way of saying these barriers are different levels of emotions that are all encompassed in that grouping, whatever that looks like for you. And that you can, but by eliminating enough of the negative emotions about on the subject, you get closer and closer to being able to do dissolving of the actual everything that's combined in, all of the different Fred stories, all of the different emotions that are combined in, that has been creating those that inertia in you. You can now start to observe that, where before, when you were down here, you couldn't see it because it was too far away from you. Like down here at the bottom, when you're from where you want to go to, where you are right now to where you would like to be, it was too big of a jump. But as you start to lighten up, and as you start to add more and more confidence and more clarity and more fuel to the tanks by taking it away. This is about multiplying by subtracting. This is about expanding and extending your abundance by subtracting away the Fred stories. And the more that you eliminate the Fred stories by simply recognizing them and then neutralizing them and dissolving them, by just doing that, you immediately it's like the rising tide. Instead of being held down, your Fred stories have been like holding your head underwater, and you're now taking you're allowed to float up a little bit more. And each time you move up the scale, now you're adding more confidence into the battle so that you can completely R&D the inertia that's standing in your way, so that you can take that first step, and the first step into something different. The first step into actually doing something with the intention of having it work out. Of that, I'm not saying that, like all the tactical things. This is the combination of the yin and the yang side of the equation. So you've got the yang down, right? You've got the external, you've got the tactical, you've got all the techniques, you've got all the methodologies that you should be doing. It's the inside game. It's the inner game. It's the expectations. It's the stories that you're telling yourself. And we've got to learn to not just try to tell ourselves an empowering story, because we know that doesn't work, right? If we just try to cover up the stories by saying, "I feel great. I'm a multimillionaire. I'm living my most abundant life," but yet we don't truly believe that. Why? Because our Fred stories are still there. They haven't truly been dissolved yet. And so you can cover it up and you can try to force it through and you can try to overpower it, but you can be sure that as sure as the sun's going to rise tomorrow, that eventually the Fred story is going to win, because you can't push hard enough on the new framework if you're fighting Fred and trying to take those first breakthrough steps forward at the same time. Okay? And I would venture to say that you have experienced this. We all have experienced all of these breakthroughs, just on different subjects, right? So there's, we could apply this to anything. We can apply this to learning to walk, right? The crawl, walk, run phases of learning to walk. We all now, there was a time where, we didn't know how to walk. We didn't know how to run. We didn't know how to crawl. I mean, in all of these things, we developed over time. Now, assuming that we don't have any physical impediments to it, we can walk and run anytime we want. And as a matter of fact, we don't have to think about it anymore. Just take breathing, for example. We don't have to think about inhale, exhale, beating of the heart. We don't think about, okay, time to tell the heart to beat. Okay, time to tell the heart to beat. Right? So what we have is the ability to start to see what is empowering us, and the opposite, what is disempowering us, what's bringing us closer by how we're feeling. And the better that we feel, you can be sure that we're RnD'ing Fred. If it's an ongoing, we're in other words, it's like a thermostat. We're setting a new set point, just like a thermostat versus a thermometer. And a lot of us have been looking at a thermometer, taking the temperature of where we are at the present moment, and saying, how can I use my thermometer to break through the next barrier? And in fact, what we're looking to do is we've got our thermostat set. And so when the thermostat gets, when the heat gets too hot, the air conditioner kicks in and it cools us down. And when it gets too cold, the heater kicks in and it raises us back up. But it keeps us inside that zone, whatever it's been set at. Well, if we're often in the emotions of lingering doubts and hopeful and always cautiously optimistic, and we're always kind of banging our head against this, well, then this is our set point. And we've learned to set the set point here. So if things get too good and we get a little bit up here, our set point pulls us back down so that we're banging our head against the water, against the wall again. And again, this is only if we don't, and the only way that you can truly set a new set point intentionally is by RnD'ing your Fred stories so that you are conscious of what was unconsciously controlling your decisions, what was unconsciously thanks, Max. I just saw that. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm going here, and I'll stop in a second and check in with you. So what we've got here is if you want to set a new set point intentionally, then really the only place that you can do that to set it to a new level, assuming that you want to be higher up on the emotional scale of positivity, of expecting your unprecedented bigger future, of being able to design that the way that you see fit, well, then you simply have to R&D your Fred stories so that it allows you to move up the scale. And I kind of lost my train of thought there, so I hope that I did that justice enough, but if not, I will come back and make it clearer shortly. So that's the big takeaway for us from being coming up against and adding our confidence. So creating a new set point where we're now, in theory, where our set point is inside of, let's say, the inspired action area. Like we want to constantly, in every subject of our life, we want to be able to move up the scale and create the results that we want to create in our life immediately because we said so, because you said so. And just access that superpower that says, I'm going here. I'm creating this because I said so, because you said so, it is. And that really is a superpower that we all have access to. If it weren't for the fact that Fred keeps tricking us into believing that we don't have access to it. And the more that we buy into and the more that we believe that what we're trying to accomplish or that the situation is influencing us, the more that we buy into, okay, no results plus a good Fred story to justify why I didn't get those results does equal results, the more that we see, in fact, that it does not equal results, what we talked about in the previous episode about no results that you're looking to achieve plus a good story. And we talked about the key trigger word being because that does not equal results. And the more that we can see that and see that it was the Fred story that kind of made us feel that way, we are letting go of it, and automatically we are raising the set point of our thermostat to a new level on that particular subject. And the more that you start to become aware of this on any subject, by the way, if you pick any subject and you go through this journey all the way through on that subject and use whatever teaching model makes sense for you, whatever goal, whatever outcomes that you're looking for, the results that you want to achieve, if you use that and you go through this journey once, you will see that the Fred stories that you worked through and that you dissolved, and if it's not a temporary, and if it's not this roller coaster where you're going up and down and up and down and back and forth, where you're actually have created a new set point for you emotionally, and you can tell by how you're feeling whether you successfully did that. And I'm not talking about in the spur of the moment. I'm talking about more often than not, what is your what is your emotional state of mind? Where do you wake up? Where do you go when you get frustrated? Do you get frustrated? Can you, can you nip it in the butt before it throws you into frustration or anger? on that particular subject? Or does it still automatically trigger a reaction? But if you will go through that journey, you will find that it actually will affect almost every other area of your life simultaneously. And because how that Fred story is showing up in this particular scenario and situation, circumstance-wise, it shows up in other areas of your life. And if you work on a Fred story that's influencing any area of your life and you truly R&D it, it improves all the other areas that Fred story may be showing up and limiting you as well and controlling your outcomes that way. So if you are looking at that, then you have control over it. And if you allow yourself to work on this, it's not saying that that if you go through this once entirely on one subject, that all of a sudden everything else is good. Until and unless if you're successfully on this one subject, R&D all of your Fred stories, through that journey, truly all of them, and eliminate all of them. And we're going to talk about this in the coming weeks about having that kind of resistance-free existence. And but it's almost impossible, at least in my experience. I mean, I don't know how to do it because I haven't been able to do it myself. But what I find is that as I R&D different aspects, the other aspects become easier to see, and I come up against them. What used to be completely unconscious to me, what used to be completely invisible in my life, is now very, very conscious and prevalent in my life. And it feels like sometimes it's even harder, but it's just because I'm now R&D'ing a core Fred story that, like one of these constant themes like inertia or, motivation on this particular subject, or, the action journey of looking to the circumstances to make me feel better. And so those are the things that you can start to see, and you will see other areas of your life improving as well. And if you're still not getting if you're getting the results that you want in one area of your life, and you've experienced the 360-degree breakthrough in that area, but not in another area, let's say you've got the financial independence and security thing on lockdown, but your relationships are a shambles and your health is going awry. Well, then one of two things is going on. Either you haven't fully built your set point to the point on your financial independence that you can have it all, that you can embrace the or you on that particular subject, there's not enough of the crossover into your relationships, into your health, into, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got different Fred stories that you can work on there that will give you gifts and actually will really take your financial, your professional leadership game to another level entirely. Because whether it's personal leadership or professional leadership or that inspirational leadership, that inner game leadership, that doesn't, it's all the same thing in terms of you raising your level of awareness and being able to increase your set point to new levels truly. And the simple way to do that, again, is by multiplying exponentially by subtracting. And again, subtracting your Fred stories. So with that, I want to pause for a second and see if there's any questions. And I think there's probably a little bit more of a delay than the 10 seconds or so that I just took. So it's probably closer to 30 seconds or maybe even a minute lag, depending on where you're watching this. So we'll let this soak in for a minute, and we'll talk about, while we're waiting to see if there is any kind of additional things that are on your all's mind. I will point out some of the cool stuff that you might want to take notice of, that you might want to be aware of. The why part of the equation for why you're doing this is so that you can get off that one and done roller coaster, that hero or zero effect. That's why. So that you can have sustained success, so that you can have fun and be serious, have fun and be focused, have fun and enjoy the journey, but also make sure that you're leaving that meaningful impact that you know is your calling, that you're supposed to. So there's that, and that's what all of this is about. And the what, well, we've been talking all about the what. We've been talking about some of the ideas around it, and some of the milestones, emotionally and otherwise, that we can feel as we go through this, as we start to come up against new set points in our thermostat, and we're moving from a thermometer-based transactional mindset into a thermostat base that we have ultimate control over. And the more confidence that we build in ourselves, the more control that we have over it. And the way, of course, that we build that confidence and control over it is by subtracting our Fred stories and by making the unconscious conscious. All right, so then we've got the how. Well, the how that we talked about in the previous episode is the same how, in essence, that we need to be focused on now. And that is the, pausing and asking yourself, is this true? And then whatever the emotion is that you're feeling, that we talked about today, this is a new way of looking at this. Whenever you're feeling less than at peace, less than your ideal state, whatever that is for you, less than feeling empowered and optimistic, and even better than optimistic is that it's just a matter of time. Like, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. And you know what? I'm expecting when is just around the corner. Any minute now. It's here because I said so. And I have complete supreme confidence that because I said so. Whenever you're feeling less than because I said so superpowers, let's call it that. Whenever you're feeling less than you can have access to your because you said so superpowers, then you can be sure that there is in fact a Fred story that's weighing you down. And if you will ask yourself, what type of a Fred story must I have been telling myself again and again and again to believe this, that's triggering this, then you will start to look at your unconsciousness. And I saw a question just came in. Okay, so can you discuss, Max wants to know, can you discuss what happens to the self when you get an inspirational feeling to do something spontaneously and not follow through? Sure. You're coming up against inertia. That's exactly the barrier that you're coming up against. You feel inspired, so you've gotten enough here, and you're kind of like maybe halfway through the inertia wall here. And whatever these emotions are, like let's not try to keep this labels just strict, okay? Let's call it whatever it makes sense to you. And there's probably 100 or 1,000 in between, of different feelings in between the confusion barrier and the inertia barrier. And oftentimes when you feel inspired, when you feel excited, it's because you had a true clarity breakthrough but not the inertia breakthrough, not the confidence breakthrough. And so what I mean by that is that the reason you don't take action oftentimes is because you feel as though it's not going to work out and you can't bear the thought of being let down again. Does that make sense? So like you feel in some situation, some circumstance, like it's not going to work, and you are in fact expecting disappointment. So your body stays at rest, the inertia, you're not willing to take that step forward. When you have enough confidence in the fuel tank, and when you will focus in on RnD'ing the Fred stories after you have the clarity breakthrough, after you have that epiphany where you see something different. Remember, the clarity breakthrough doesn't mean that it requires action. This is where the confidence breakthrough that requires a behavior shift to overcome the body at rest, or the body that's in emotion, but it's just in emotion in a different area than you want to be going, and you need to like jolt it back the other way. And we're going to work on some actual techniques in the next 2 or 3 weeks or so, some tools to help keep you on course with all of this on the yin side as well as the yang side of the equation. And so I think that what you will find is as you start to add confidence to the mix, and the more that you can expect, you're anticipating, where it doesn't feel like the result that you're looking for is far away at all. It doesn't feel impossible at all. It feels closer. It feels like, oh yeah, I can do that. That works. You know, even if you've never been there before, but you feel like it's just around the corner. And in fact, I can now bridge that gap into, you know, there's zero uncertainty left. There's very, very little uncertainty left. The more where does uncertainty come from? Comes from Fred stories, right? The more Fred stories that you have running in your unconscious, the more uncertainty that you're dealing with. And that's where fear comes from, right? So if you're not taking action, you'll find that as you start to have that breakthrough, the action journey becomes, oh yeah, like it's not a have to. It's not something that's hard anymore. It's not something that you say, holy crap, you know, how did I get here? You know, I like, it's not an effort. You don't have to force it by any stretch. You just automatically do it. And in fact, you'll do it in a way that you probably won't even realize that you shifted your behavior, that you took a different action, because it was just the natural outflow that you expected that it was. But if you then go back and examine your results, you'll see that something shifted. And oftentimes it may not even be your behavior, your action, because you shifted internally and you overcame it, and you are indeed more and more of the Fred stories. What you will find is that you have an easier and easier time, and that people are reacting to you differently, and you can allow different options, different opportunities that you couldn't even see, that were here all along, but you were filtering them out, or more exactly, your Fred stories were filtering it out. And you couldn't see that at one point, you couldn't see that the lid on the jar was open. And so you're jumping and you're jumping and you're jumping, and you still think that you're trapped. So you're jumping, right? But you're only jumping as high as the lid once was, because you're saying, well, like, I want to believe that the lid isn't there anymore, but every time I look up, I still am fearful that it's there. Well, then you're expecting that if you jump any higher than where that lid was, or where you perceived it to be, that you're going to smack your head into it, and you're anticipating failing. You're anticipating pain, right? So that's the Fred story coming back, and that is why you're not taking action. You see clarity, like you can say, oh yeah, I got it. I had the clarity, I had the epiphany. That makes total sense. In fact, I'm looking up there and I can see sky. I can see the skylight. I can see the big picture. Wow. But when it comes to taking action, I don't fully believe it yet. Now, here's what happens. The instant that you know that there is no lid on the jar, right? That you recognize that there isn't a lid, that you truly know it, that there's zero uncertainty left, that you are certain that there is no lid on that jar. And you remember who you are in terms of your ability to jump out, that the only reason that you had a flat head is because you're capable of jumping right out because you've been smacking your head into that lid. The instant that you do that, you just become who you are and you jump right out. Didn't take effort, didn't take a lot of energy. It just is. And boom, you're out. And you may not even have realized it because now all of a sudden you're still jumping in there. But now all of a sudden, because you have zero uncertainty about smacking your head, that you're not going to smack your head into the jar, that there are no limits on you, and boom, you're out of here. Make sense? All right. So the metaphors can start to break down the more we ride them, but this is a pretty good one, at least for where we are right now. And in fact, I'm using the analogy of a Fred story and blaming Fred as a way to pull out our unconsciousness. But in fact, it's part of the, like, you don't want to continue to stay stuck on that and attached to, Fred being the problem forever. You want to use it as the tool. I think one of the cliches is that we've heard a bunch of times that, if you have a bunch of thorns in your hand or in your foot, and you pull one thorn out and you use that other thorn to pull out the other thorns, to pop the rest of them out. Well, that thorn is, in this case, that you're using to leverage the other ones out. That's the Fred story analogy. That's the metaphor that we're using. That's the one tool that we're talking about here. And that's the how. And at a certain point, though, you will have pulled out all the other thorns. And if you continue to dig yourself with the same thorn, then you continue to injure yourself and continue to limit yourself with that. And at a certain point, you can just say, toss it. I'm done with that. I don't need that as a resource anymore to focus on. All right. So I hope that helps, Max. And we've also talked about the how quite a bit. And we've reinforced it as we went here. And the where else we've also been talking about quite a bit as well. And one of the things that I've been considering doing that I would love some feedback on is the challenge here is because I want to make each one of these episodes valuable as a standalone, as well as being able to build on a foundation here so that you can, encompass all of this. And no matter where somebody's coming into the equation at, whether they come in today or a year from now, they can have the same opportunities to work through the journey, and without me having to work through the journey every single time for each individual person. Otherwise, I can't continue to share the information, the story, the ideas with everybody, because we're always starting back over. That's like the law of compounding, that we never allow it to get to day 30 or 31 because we're always starting all over at day 10 again at the beginning. So what I'm getting at is that, yes, of course, you can go wherever we're syndicating the show. You can go back and look at the previous episodes and watch them. But I also find that if we have a kind of a time-space learning that comes to you rather than you have to go to it, that it can be a better advantageous way to build those habits up until it becomes an ongoing habit. So what I'm getting at is, what I'm considering doing is creating these episodes and turning them into, in addition to the videos that we're doing at the same time, is turning them into audio coaching sessions that have a progression to them, just like we have a progression here, that anybody can opt in for at a certain point and have it spaced out so that that as the, whether they come in, they get the next episode or the next installment accordingly, and it's the audio that gets downloaded directly to your device. So not only can it go to you and be updated, you can actually listen to it on the go, download it to your iPad or your whatever you choose to use to listen to it, and go in that fashion. So that's what I'm considering doing as a way to add this to the tools and the faction. So if people like that idea, let me know, and we can continue to move forward on that. And unless there's some other thoughts or questions that are coming up, I think what we're going to do is wrap it up for today. So I think that just about covers the exhaustiveness. Oh, so we have one more barrier, and in my opinion, it's the most important one. At least it was for me, because this is where, like, when I talked about making and losing millions of dollars, not just once, twice, 3, 4 times. Like, it took me 32 years to become a millionaire for the first time. And then over the next 10 years, from 32 to 42, I made and lost millions multiple times. The reason is, and this snapback, and where things all, like, you can break through it and you can force it for long, but then the inevitable infinite snapback loop happens. Well, that is the final barrier, which is the barrier of motivated action. And the breakthrough, of course, is inspired action, to be inspiration-based and intentionally choosing the inspiration-based path so that you have the tools to do it. And that's the journey, right? That's the emotional journey. That's the RnD'ing Fred story journey through the whole thing for the full 360-degree process, so that you can experience complete success, as you call it to be, where you can enjoy the material side of the equation, the financial freedom, and the and part, being happy, being joyful, knowing that you're making a meaningful contribution and delivering meaningful value for people in the world, and that you're developing that financial success and security at everybody's, at their service, not at their expense. And what better feeling can there be than to know that this is what you were put here to do, whatever this is for you, that you know that you have something, some gifts, some joy that you can share, that only you can share with the world in the way that you can share it. And you're out to do that and have the financial success, have the material success that you're looking to achieve simultaneous to that. What better feeling is it? Well, the final barrier is motivation. And that's the journey through that. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the third installment this week, and the third episode that is going to pull all of this together so that we can then experience the 360-degree breakthrough. And really, what's the 360-degree breakthrough? Well, it's the because you said so superpower, and being able to access it on any subject at will. I'm going here because I said so. You're going to where you are. You're going to create the results that you're going to create because you said so, not because Fred or the circumstances or the stars align or the moon is in retrograde or whatever. None of that matters, because you're accessing the 360-degree success of your because you said so superpowers. All right, folks. Well, thank you very much for being a part of this, and I will see you for the final installment this week, and then we'll also get into what next week is going to look like, because we're going to get into a teaching model so that we can actually learn and do simultaneously, so that we can escape the linear learning trap where this is just not what we did last week and this week have been intellectualized, right? It's been a lot of strategic thinking, learning on that level, but it hasn't been, unless you've been, and hopefully you have been doing the specific how examples and exercises to R&D Fred, primarily to recognize what's going on and to see Fred in action, so that you're no longer a victim of a particular circumstance or a situation or somebody or anybody else's victim for that matter. Well, next week we'll begin to actually put this into action of a process that we can learn and do. So the 3 workshop episodes for next week are going to be all about applying this and taking this journey into action so that you can take it to the streets and start to experience it full steam ahead. I'm looking forward to sharing all of this with you, and more importantly, looking forward to see you on Friday or episode number 6, whenever you happen to tune into that. Oh, and Tom, if you're watching and you're still interested in chewing on some stuff and doing some back and forth, I can do that tomorrow, or we could also do it sometime next week, depending on what your schedule will allow. Thank you all. Talk to you real soon. See ya.